Hey everyone, and welcome to Milo Game Reviews, where we review games both new and old on all platforms. My name is Milo, and if you like the content that I make, then please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a review when it comes out. Today I want to talk about the original Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, as I've been playing that game in preparation for the new release of its remake, Metal Gear Solid Delta. Now, I'm a big fan of the Metal Gear series, and my first entry was Metal Gear Solid 2, which I hope to review someday as well on this channel. Chronologically, in the story, MGS3 is the first game, and by many considered to be the best and Kojima's magnum opus. Let's find out if that notion indeed holds up 2 decades later. First, before we begin, I should say that I mentioned the original Metal Gear Solid 3, but the version I played is the one in the remastered collection that is actually rather Metal Gear Solid 3 Substance, which offered the freedom to move the camera in 360 degrees, whereas the original, I believe, was stuck to mostly fixed camera angles. I actually also own the original for the PlayStation 2, but it has been many years since I last played that, so I actually don't remember if this indeed was the case. Snake Eater tells the story of Special Agent Naked Snake, voiced once again brilliantly by David Hayter, and who was dropped behind enemy lines in Russia during the Cold War. He is tasked with retrieving a Russian scientist named Sokolov, who defected to the West but was recaptured. Everything goes smoothly up to meeting Sokolov, and then something happens that messes up the entire mission. Snake's mentor and mother figure, known as the Boss, defects to the Soviet Union and wounds Snake to the point where he's barely alive. Snake's bond with the Boss is beyond anything that he feels for another human being, so this betrayal falls down very hard on Snake as he narrowly escapes to Russian territory. The story then takes a small jump of a few weeks, where Snake is sent in once again after recovering to find and retrieve Sokolov, while also dealing with the Boss who betrayed him. Now, this first mission that I just described can be seen as the prologue and lasts for about an hour or so, and is absolute perfection. It is so well paced, beautifully presented with great cutscenes, and full of vibe and atmosphere. Metal Gear games are very well known for having incredibly long cutscenes, and this already becomes apparent the first time you play this game. I am not kidding when I say that during the first 30 minutes of the game, you only have about 2 minutes of playtime, whereas the other 25 minutes is just cutscenes. Now, luckily, the cutscenes themselves are very well directed and action-packed, which takes away from them becoming dull or boring. The long codec calls can indeed sometimes drag out for a bit longer than they should, but they are overall quite well written. But during the first hour, you are presented with so many new mechanics that the game gets to offer. Up until MGS3, you were mostly fighting and sneaking in corridors, and had to rely on the radar that vividly showcased the enemy's sight in the form of a visibility cone. This was now gone, as you were in the wilderness and actually had to properly survey your surroundings to spot enemies in the dense forests. Other introductions were the wildlife, and even playing it now, I was surprised how lively and lush the jungle felt, despite being developed for PlayStation 2 technology. You will come across caimans, fish, birds, crabs, spiders, frogs, mice, scorpions, and of course, plenty of different types of snakes. Survival is another aspect that is new, where you now have a stamina bar that depletes over time or when performing certain actions like hanging from a ledge or rope. To replenish your stamina, you will need to eat, and though you will have some rations with you in the beginning, at a certain point you will have to catch wildlife and eat that. It's a cool aspect and felt very fresh, as the whole survival genre of video games did not exist yet. Now we have plenty of those, but back then, it felt really new, and even to this day, it still feels good, though it pretty much consists of going into a menu, pressing a single button, and then hearing a sound to know your stamina is replenished. You don't have to prepare anything in order to eat it. Other things in the survival mode include health and medicine, as you could get different types of wounds like cuts, bruises, broken bones, or poisoning. To remedy this, you would have to choose different health items in order to cure you. A broken bone would need a bandage and a splint, while poisoning needed a serum and deep cuts needed to be disinfected, sewn up, and bandaged. Then the other major new mechanic that was introduced is the camouflage system, where you could put on different types of face paint and uniform camouflage to help you become less visible to the enemy. You would see a percentage at the top of the screen to show you how well you were hidden, and being well camouflaged meant that enemies would not spot you even if they were incredibly close and you just laid still. Because obviously standing or walking around would greatly reduce your camouflage, crouching would improve it, but laying completely flat and still would have the best result. And so with those mechanics, you get dropped in the Russian jungle a second time and now have a much larger area to explore and infiltrate. Rather than an open world, it presents big areas that are connected together through short fades to black. And even though the first hour is in my opinion perfection in terms of storytelling in games, the story that comes after is also great, with many interesting and varied characters that have proper depth to them. You will have many run-ins with the overconfident Revolver Ocelot, who already was introduced in the prologue, or the mysterious and seductive Eva. At the head of the bad guys stands the brutal Colonel Volgin, who loves to break his enemies with the power of electricity. The boss herself is also a really cool character with a beautiful and tragic backstory. Characters have always been a strong point in the Metal Gear series, and Snake Eater does not disappoint in that department. Now, the gameplay of Snake Eater is still heavily focused on stealth, but more so than any other MGS before, you had the freedom to approach situations in different ways. Something that would be taken to the absurd level in Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. You see, you are tasked with being sneaky, but it's not one of those stealth games where it immediately goes game over the moment you are caught. You can stay out of sight and sneak past everyone without them noticing. Or you could shoot them with a tranquilizer gun and put them to sleep so that they are down but not dead. You can get up real close and personal and choke them out, or interrogate them for information or items. You can lay booby traps using TNT or grenades, and there are plenty of weapons to find if you want to take a lethal approach. Now, previous Metal Gear games also had a lethal or non-lethal approach, but never before did it feel this much like a sandbox where you had so many options or choices. You can find different pistols, machine guns, sniper rifles, shotguns, and even rocket launchers. You can all use these to your heart's content and shred everyone to bits and blast helicopters out of the sky while the alarm sirens are ringing while everyone is on high alert. I, on the other hand, did everything stealthily and did not kill anyone except for those you face in the boss fights, and had a more limited arsenal that I used. I did explore and found things like the shotgun or the rocket launchers, but I used my trusty tranquilizer pistol, a fist to the face, or a very James Bond-esque gadget that looks like a cigarette case that emits gas that puts enemies to sleep. In that sense, I only had a few weapons and playstyles that I used, but it did not feel any less gratifying or engaging. I loved being stealthy and not having to deal with enemies if they were not in my way. It was a choice that I made as a player, and knowing how much carnage you could produce did make me want to replay the game again and go for a bloodthirsty playthrough. I also want to quickly mention the James Bond thing, as that gadget indeed does feel like James Bond, and the intro theme to this game really resembles a James Bond intro. But I do have to say that in terms of story and pacing, it feels nothing like a James Bond movie in my opinion. Sure, it has the rough male protagonist, a scarred bad guy that is a bit on the cartoonish side, an attractive lady as the counterpart, but the entire survival and military hook that the story offers makes it to where it does not feel like James Bond at all. James Bond is all about luxury cars and locales while offering action, and Snake Eater rather is dirty and gritty, and I actually really like that. Besides great gameplay in terms of stealth and action, what I also just love about this game is the pacing, and each time I replay it, I am reminded of just how good that pacing is. The long cutscenes are indeed something that you love or hate, but the gameplay pacing is superb to where you are never in a location for too long to where it becomes boring or repetitive. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of cave environments in games. They're usually dark and boring looking, and there's a part in Snake Eater where you are lost and alone in a dark cave. Now, in some games, these cave levels can take up to half an hour or even longer, but here you are only there for about 10 minutes and then never have a cave level again. Same goes for a later segment where you are in the mountains and have to go through a military outpost. At first, it might seem that this will take an incredibly long time, since there are many guards patrolling and helicopters flying by. But this also only takes around 10 to 15 minutes and then sends you to a completely different area afterwards. The pacing is so much better than MGS 1 and 2, where you had a lot of moments where you had to backtrack or go through the same environment again and again, like when looking for the bombs in MGS 2. Control-wise, it does sometimes leave a bit to be desired, especially since you cannot walk while being crouched, which feels very unnatural and dated by this point. That is one thing that I hope they will fix and improve with the remake. Another thing that I thought did not age well, to my surprise, were many of the boss fights. This game is a bit of a shock, since I remember the boss fights quite fondly, but replaying them now, they were almost all of them very simple and outlasted their welcome. An example of a boss fight against the character The Pain, who is an awesomely designed soldier who uses the power of wasps to kill his enemy. You fight him in the earlier mentioned cave, and in order to beat him, you have to jump in the water and dive so that he loses sight of you and then attack him in the back. You do this over and over and over again to the point where it becomes kind of ridiculous since he can never find you despite you only moving in between two different positions. The fight with the boss herself was also really clunky with very poor animations. It felt almost slapstick and hilarious to see how badly it was animated. It's like Snake is just giving her some love taps and then she goes stiff and falls to the floor like a mannequin. The one boss fight that I think has still aged very well and is so awesome is the fight against the End. He's an elite sniper and it really is a cat and mouse hunt through the thick jungle. You need to stay hidden and look for a Sheena light in the distance coming from his scope. You can then shoot him from afar, or try to move around unseen and attack him in the back. There are multiple options to approaching this, as you have also thermal vision to easier see his footsteps and find him that way. You really feel like a hunter tracking down his prey, and I think more games nowadays should have boss fights like this. It was absolutely exhilarating. There are also many cool little Easter eggs and moments that the MGS series is known for, like the earlier mentioned fight against the End that can be completely skipped by not playing the game for a week in real time, as the End will have died from old age. Or the fact that playing lethal and non-lethal actually has a huge impact on a certain section involving the Sorrow, where you are basically going down the river Styx and are confronted with literally all the enemies you killed in the game. Every single soldier you dealt with in a lethal manner shows up here again and tries to damage you. That means that if you played it like I did and did not kill any regular soldiers, then this segment actually might even be a bit bland and empty with only the bosses showing up to hurt you. But if you mowed everyone down, this segment can suddenly be really difficult and challenging, as you have to avoid dozens and dozens of spirits that all want their revenge on you. I think this is a brilliant design, and one of those small moments that sets Metal Gear apart from the rest of what gaming has to offer. So all in all, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is an amazing game with an incredible story that still holds up today, with good pacing that never keeps you somewhere for too long, with lovable and believable characters and solid gameplay to boot that offers freedom and replayability. The only downsides are the dated controls and the anticlimactic boss fights here and there. But even then, the boss fights are not bad by any stretch. They are just dated and therefore do not take away from the fact that Snake Eater is indeed one of the best stealth and story games ever made. In the end, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater gets a 9.2. For many years, I actually thought that MGS4 was my favorite in the series since I loved that ending so much. But having played through Snake Eater multiple times in the past few years, I'm not so sure anymore. Snake Eater might indeed also be my favorite, though in order to fully check that, I will have to revisit Old Snake as well and do a review someday of the PS3 exclusive Metal Gear Solid 4.